What if the most clever men in the room are the ones you never notice? What if power was never about who could shout the loudest, but who could go unseen the longest? In this world, we are taught to broadcast. Share everything, post every win, declare your intentions, your goals, your truth. Every platform rewards exposure. Every voice fights to be the loudest. But the strategist knows something they don't. He doesn't announce, he doesn't perform, he doesn't explain, he observes, he records, he prepares. The game of power is not won through applause. It is won through silence, through what is not said, through what is not seen. Because every time you speak without intent, you reveal your thinking. Every time you post without strategy, you give away your position. Every time you express before execution, you dilute your power. The world wants you visible because visibility is vulnerability. Think of it. What happens when everyone knows your plan? They prepare for it. What happens when they know your moves before you make them? They block you. You become predictable. And predictability is death in the game of power. They tell you to speak your truth. But what if your truth is your weapon? Do you hand over your sword before the battle even begins? Every time you express, you create a blueprint for your enemy. A lion roars and the jungle listens, but they also know where to find it. A serpent slithers in silence. It needs no announcement, because by the time you see it, it's already too late. Ask yourself, how many times have you sabotaged your own momentum by broadcasting it? How many times have you given away advantage just to be seen? How many times have you chosen attention over execution? The world worships exposure, but exposure is the leash. The strategist moves differently. He builds behind closed doors, he refines in silence, he acts before anyone knows there was even a decision to make. Visibility is not freedom. Visibility is a trap. Power lives where no one is looking. You were told that to be respected, you must be known, that to be powerful, you must be loud, that to lead, you must be followed, but all of it was a lie. Visibility is not strength, it's a leash, because the moment they can see you, they begin to track you. And what can be tracked can be studied. What can be studied can be mapped, what can be mapped can be predicted, and what can be predicted can be neutralized. That is the cost of exposure. Every time you raise your voice to be heard, you lower your ability to be feared. Every time you announce your goals, you hand over the coordinates to your opposition. Every time you seek to be known, you give them a blueprint to stop you. This is how most men fall, not by weakness, but by visibility. They say, show your work. But every time you show it, you invite critique. They say, speak your truth. But every time you do, someone starts building a weapon out of your words. They say, let the world see you. But every time they do, they find new ways to limit you. And this is why the strategist moves in silence. He doesn't explain his vision, he enacts it. He doesn't parade his strength, he conceals it until the moment it's too late to stop. He isn't known, he is studied, and yet never understood. The men you truly fear are not the ones posting videos, taking stages, flaunting muscles or money. The ones you fear are the ones who say little, reveal less, and strike only when the outcome is inevitable. The quiet man in the corner, the one who watches more than he speaks, the one who never interrupts, yet ends the conversation when he finally does. Ask yourself, how many times have you lost ground trying to gain attention? How many times has your noise become someone else's advantage? How many times have you turned strength into strategy for your opponent, just by letting them see too much? Every time you express without strategy, you expose yourself. Every time you chase visibility, you give away your unpredictability. And every time you are predictable, you are powerless. To be seen is to be accessible. To be known is to be targetable. And the strategist refuses both. He builds in the dark, moves in silence, and never arrives until he's already won. You've been taught that transparency is truth, that sharing is strength, that if you open your mind, your heart, your strategy to the world, you'll be loved, followed, respected. But here's the hidden cost. Transparency isn't strength, it's surrender. Every time you explain yourself online, you train the world to anticipate your next move. Every tweet is a breadcrumb, every caption a confession, every motivational post a leak of intent. They applaud your honesty, but behind the applause are eyes mapping your blueprint, studying your rhythm, decoding your drive. You think you're building connection, but you're just handing over ammunition. There was a time when warriors wore armor. Now, men undress their minds for likes. They convert their pain into posts, their wounds into content, their struggles into stories they hope will spark sympathy. But sympathy is not power. It's exposure. It's ammunition for people who don't care about your victory, only your vulnerabilities. Ask yourself, how many times have you watched someone share their plan, only to have it intercepted? How many times have you seen a man document his process, only to have someone else perfect it, steal it, and win with it? Every time you show your process, you give them a playbook. Every time you share your dreams, you invite their sabotage. Every time you announce your comeback, you alert the opposition to prepare. The strategist uses transparency against itself. He lets others overshare. He lets others expose. And while they lay out their whole strategy for the world to judge, he watches, collects, adapts. He isn't silent because he's afraid. He's silent because he knows transparency is now a liability, and silence is the last true advantage left. Here's the paradox. The less you show, the more they project. The strategist becomes a mirror. Give them nothing and they will fill the space with their own fears, hopes, and assumptions. They will expose themselves trying to understand you. This is how silence dominates. It is not absence, it is pressure. When you withhold, they lean in. When you pause, they panic. When you say little, they say too much. The void you create by withholding becomes a stage where their insecurities perform. Walk into a room and say nothing. Watch how quickly others scramble to define you. They'll talk behind your back because your silence denies them the confrontation they crave. They want to react to you, but you've given them nothing to react to, and that unnerves them. Silence creates imagination, and imagination creates fear. Because they don't know what you're thinking, they start assuming the worst. They interpret your quiet as judgment, your stillness as calculation. That psychological discomfort, that's power. Not loud, not boastful, just pressure without presence. Influence is not an expression, it's an orchestration. True influence doesn't scream, it whispers just enough to make others listen harder. When you reveal nothing, you force others to reveal everything. Their insecurities, their biases, their patterns. You become the gravity in the room simply by not offering a center. Picture a boardroom. 3 men argue. One interrupts, one tries too hard to impress, and one sits quietly watching. He hasn't spoken, he hasn't moved. But every time he glances, the others react. Why? Because silence is being interpreted as strategy, and strategy is feared when it cannot be predicted. While others overshare, you retreat. While others seek followers, you observe their patterns. Every word they use, every glance they make, every nervous laugh, it becomes data. Every reaction they give, every signal they send, it becomes part of your map. And they don't even know it. Ask yourself, how many times have you revealed too much, only to regret it later? How often have your emotions painted targets on your back? How often have your words become weapons used against you? Every time you speak unnecessarily, you give away leverage. Every time you explain what should remain unspoken, you surrender position. And every time you let them define you, you lose the ability to surprise them. Let them think. Let them wonder. Let them talk. Because while they burn oxygen trying to understand you, you are sharpening the blade they never saw coming. Let them think you are slow. Let them believe you are soft. Let them train for a version of you that does not exist. This is not deception. This is design. A strategist does not correct false assumptions. He lets them grow. He waters them with silence and allows his opponents to build castles out of sand. When they expect chaos, he delivers stillness. When they prepare for noise, he offers silence. When they predict a storm, he brings drought. This is how you dominate without conflict, not by overwhelming them, but by letting them miscalculate. Every time they overestimate their preparation, they lower their guard. Every time they think they understand you, they prepare for the wrong version of you. Every time they train to fight what you used to be, you evolve. This is the game within the game. The weapon isn't just your move, it's their misstep. Think of war generals throughout history who never entered the front line. They studied the terrain, disrupted supply lines, spread misinformation, baited attacks, and waited. Waited until the enemy was tired, overconfident, or distracted. And then they struck. Quietly, decisively, brutally. Power is not always force. Often it's patience. Often, it's invisibility. Often, it's the ability to be misread until the move has already been made. Imagine a chessboard. Your opponent thinks he's playing a novice. You let him believe it. You sacrifice pawns. You delay action. You pretend confusion. And just when he declares victory, he realizes, too late, that he's been in a trap the entire time. Let them see your shadow, but never your shape. Let them prepare for a battle that already ended. Let them talk about you in rooms you never entered. Let them prepare defenses for threats you never intended to send. And when they finally understand what happened, when they realize their entire plan was based on an illusion, you're already gone. Already winning the next game they didn't even know had started. Sometimes the most brilliant move isn't a strike, it's a smile. The strategist knows power doesn't always look like dominance. Sometimes it looks like weakness, like humility, like incompetence. And that's exactly why it works. To control perception is to control preparation. If they see you as dangerous, they armor up. But if they see you as harmless, they relax. They get comfortable. They expose their patterns. Their assumptions become your camouflage. The strategist doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes he hides in plain sight. He plays the fool. He nods along. He pretends to be learning when he's actually recording. He asks questions he already knows the answer to. He lets others feel superior while quietly dissecting their tactics. This is not deception. It's controlled misdirection. It's identity masking. It's creating an image just believable enough for others to underestimate. And that underestimation becomes the blade. Imagine a meeting. Everyone assumes you're junior, new, uncertain. You don't correct them. You observe. You take note of what they reveal in their arrogance. You map their blind spots. Then, when the time is right, one sentence, one quiet suggestion, one decisive action, and the entire hierarchy flips. Ask yourself, how many times have you tried to prove your intelligence too early? How many times have you shown strength too soon? How many times did being right cost you your leverage? The strategist knows it's not about proving who you are. It's about controlling who they think you are until the truth becomes undeniable. He doesn't just remain silent. He speaks when it serves the illusion. He doesn't just hide, he plays a role. Because when the mask falls, the game is already over. Intelligence without restraint is noise. Strategy without silence is theater. A powerful man speaks once. He listens 10 times. He waits until his words are not answers but verdicts. Restraint is the mark of command. Repetition becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes control. Let others react. Let them scream and scramble. Let them race to be seen and heard. The strategist watches. He observes the chaos not as a participant, but as a surgeon. He lets the fire burn out while he maps the terrain. Because while others reach for attention, he reaches for position. The calmest man in the room is the one most in control. Because he has nothing to prove. Because he already knows what others are still guessing. Because while others waste energy on being understood, he understands everything. Imagine a round table. 5 voices talk over each other. Opinions clash, emotions swell. Then one man, silent until now, asks a single question. The entire room pauses. That is restraint. That is timing. That is what turns silence into dominance. Restraint is rare in today's world. Everyone wants to speak. Everyone wants to be heard. But every time you rush to explain, you weaken your position. Every time you justify, you concede. Every time you interrupt, you reveal your impulse. Ask yourself, how many times have you given away power because you couldn't wait? How often have you responded instantly, only to regret it? How often have you spoken just to fill the silence when the silence was already working in your favor? The man who waits, who delays gratification, who resists the urge to explain, he owns the timing. And timing is everything. Because when he moves, the board shifts. When he speaks, the room resets. When he acts, the opposition collapses under its own weight. The strategist is not passive, he is surgical. He does not withhold because he is weak. He withholds because he is in command. He doesn't play all his cards, he lets others show their hand first. And when their voices fade, when their strategies unravel, he moves once and the game changes. Not because he was louder, but because he was precise. When you've mastered silence, you begin to influence the world without effort. You move once and the system adapts. You say one thing and it echoes louder than 1,000 speeches. This is the shift from unreadable to unavoidable. It is not about presence, It is about gravitational force, and that force is built in the dark. They start to watch you differently. They look twice when you haven't moved. They listen more closely when you haven't spoken. They read into your nods, your pauses, your posture. Your stillness begins to carry weight. This is power, not forced, but felt. Not asked for, but automatically granted. The strategist becomes a ghost with gravity. He enters the room and the atmosphere changes, not because he demands attention, but because he doesn't. Not because he fills the space, but because his absence from it would be louder. You've built tension. You've shaped perception. Now your silence isn't empty, it's charged. Every breath becomes a statement. Every glance, a direction. And now with one calculated move, you tilt the entire field. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to prove. You don't need to speak over them. You have conditioned them to expect depth, to expect calculation, to expect consequence. That is the legacy of quiet preparation. Picture a room where one man leans back and watches while the rest argue. He's not lazy, he's loaded. He doesn't interrupt because he doesn't need to. When he finally speaks, just once, it redefines the conversation. The others adjust their tone. The room bends around him. He doesn't change for the room. The room changes for him. That is what happens when silence becomes myth. You shift from being mysterious to being untouchable, from a question mark to a force, from possibility to principle. This is not charisma, this is architecture. You've gone from a man to a symbol, and symbols don't need to explain themselves. You have shifted from mystery to myth, and myths are more powerful than men. You don't always need to swing the sword to win the war. History has crowned many kings who never stepped onto the battlefield, because true power isn't in the clash, it's in the design, in strategy, in control without exposure. Consider Quintus Fabius Maximus, the Roman general who refused open battle with Hannibal. They called him a coward. But while others charged blindly and lost, he bled the enemy slowly. He used terrain, he used time. He made silence the battlefield. And eventually his critics called him what he always was, the savior of Rome. Or look at Zhuge Liang in ancient China, a man who could disarm armies not with weapons, but with timing. Once, he emptied an entire city, had left the gates wide open, and played a calm tune on the zither. The enemy, sensing a trap, fled without a fight. No army, no speech, just strategy wrapped in silence. A strategist doesn't need chaos. He engineers predictability so he can bend it. He doesn't rush to fight. He positions the fight to come to him, on his terms, under his control. Ask yourself, how many times have you tried to force action when you could have manipulated positioning? How many times have you charged when silence would have made your enemy slip? To outsmart everyone, study those who won without being seen. They didn't chase the throne. They reshaped the battlefield until the throne rolled to them. Be that. The final phase is disappearance. When presence is no longer needed, when the systems move in your absence. This is not retreat. This is rule. This is the strategist's final move. Not to appear at the top, but to dissolve into influence so deep it no longer needs a face. The architect doesn't shout from the rooftops. He disappears into myth. He lets the empire whisper his name. He lets his style become system. He lets his choices become standard. Understand this. Mystery sustains power longer than presence ever could. Applause fades. Memory lingers. Fame is a firework. Legacy is tectonic. When they no longer see you but still feel you, that is when you have truly won. Your silence becomes legacy. Your absence becomes signal. Your invisibility becomes proof that the mission is now alive in others. You're not stepping back. You've elevated. You're not hiding. You've handed the map to no one, and yet the path remains. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to guide, because your presence is now embedded into process, into culture, into consequence. And now, you simply vanish into legend, not because you're gone, but because the system now breathes your breath, speaks your structure, echoes your intent. That is the strategist's immortality. Disappearance is not the end. It's the metamorphosis. When you've walked the path of restraint, masked yourself in misdirection, won through silence, and vanished from the stage, you transcend. You become more than a man. You become the myth they build systems around. The strategist no longer needs to hold the frame, because the frame now holds him. His posture becomes standard. His silence becomes scripture. His methods ripple outward until the entire environment begins to echo him without ever naming him. His name fades, but his influence scales. He no longer needs to speak because his design has been embedded into the culture of the powerful. This is the highest tier of control, not to be remembered, but to be replicated. When men mirror your behaviors thinking they're original, when they quote your philosophy without knowing you wrote it, when they defend your creations believing they thought them up, you are no longer a voice. You are an algorithm. Ask yourself, what if your silence was the source code of dominance? What if your disappearance was not an ending, but a duplication event? Would you still crave recognition, or would you crave replication? The strategist doesn't just disappear. He dissolves into design, and when the next generation rises, they won't follow him. They'll follow a structure that whispers his name without ever speaking it. This is the strategist's standard. Legacy without spotlight, power without proof, influence without origin. This is the final form of silence. The man who moves in silence controls outcomes others can't even see. He is not liked, he is not famous, he is not loud, but he is unshakable. Because no one knows what he's thinking, because he gave them nothing to prepare for. Because every move was made without announcement, every pivot executed without permission, every shift unnoticed until it was already irreversible. Now ask yourself, how many times have you let someone less skilled speak louder? How often have you explained your intentions to people who never earned the right to understand them? How often have you dimmed your fire to be seen when you could have burned silently and reshaped everything? Are you willing to be unreadable? To be underestimated? To vanish and still shape the world? Let the world chase attention. Let them fight for applause. You will build empires in the quiet. You will master outcomes in the shadows. And in the noise of the digital age, you will become the myth they can't decode, the principle they can't defeat, the force they can't see coming and can never stop.